Om Stavakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Stavakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampadrita Vigraham Vai Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampadrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Sirasa Namami. Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate, who is adored by all, pure, eternal, infinite by nature. Out of His infinite grace on the devotees, the Divine Supreme has assumed a human form in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. Let us bow down to Him. Let us try to dwell upon the personality of Sri Ramakrishna. Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate, who came to establish universal religion. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Today's topic, panacea for all ills. We find that human life is full of sufferings and miseries. In spite of little happiness here and there, mostly it is full of sufferings. No doubt we are all pursuing for getting integral happiness, and also we are struggling to liberate from miseries. Then why is it we are land up in unwanted sufferings? The reason is the grave misconception of sensuous enjoyments for happiness has brought about untold sufferings. The cognizance of riches as the absolute means for achieving happiness has created and aggravated ideological conflicts and threats. The annihilation of human race has become imminent as a consequence of these conflicts. the whole world is boiling with conflicts, resulting in tremendous hatred, violence, and bringing tremendous sufferings to the humanity. So we should very clearly know that happiness and sensuous pleasures are not the same. Happiness is absolute and eternal, while sensuous pleasures are transitory. Happiness is a sublime faculty, a state of tranquil mind. Sensuous pleasures, on the other hand, are feelings of unsteady senses. The sources of their origin are also different. Happiness comes from within, from realization of the truth. Pleasures are experienced from momentary tastes. The misconception of pleasure for happiness has evidently thrown us into the ditches of miseries. The cognizance of riches as the absolute means for achievement of pleasures has brought about ideological conflicts and grave threat to human existence. So, we are plunged, as it were, into a war for usurpation of the maximum means of riches. The scientific discoveries and inventions, which were primarily meant for providing bodily comforts and luxuries to the mankind, are being misapplied, and they have become means of destruction of human race. For his survival, therefore, man has to find out the way and means which could turn the threats of the science to its blessings to the mankind. The means which would protect human race in all eventualities against all the furies of nature and the science. So, a panacea of all ills has to be discovered. The panacea which could turn poison to nectar, shower of fragments of fire into a shower of soothing and refreshing dewdrops, and bullets into a chain of garlands. In a nutshell, the panacea which could turn all undesirables into the desirables has to be discovered. The ostensible aims of all the governments of the world are to assure maximum bodily comforts and luxuries to the governed. The United Nations organization is the result of the anxieties of the governments of the world to assure the people a peaceful life, universal love and brotherhood, equality of opportunity and profession, opportunity to develop human virtues and righteousness, and ending of distinction of caste and creed. But unfortunately, the methods they have adopted to implement them are so faulty that they have affected quite reversely, and the mankind has been thrown out in the notion of mass miseries. The minimum any government is expected to assure to its governed is a sufficient food, sufficient clothing and accommodation. But even in this respect, all the governments have not been quite successful. Expenses of administration exceed their income, and they are financially crippled and unable to provide proper food, clothes and houses to all the governed. They do not know whence to get funds except squeezing the governed or trying to usurp the riches of others. The governments of the world should therefore discover the Parash gem, which is known for producing immense gold by its touch with the raw iron, or the kalpa tree, which gives all that is desired and asked for. When they would discover the Parash gem or the kalpa tree, no government will ever think of extending its territories or usurping others' riches, and the very gem of wars and hostilities would be destroyed. Now, we have to pause for a moment and think. Is there any such thing or potency which can provide all that is needed or asked for, or which can turn all undesirables into desirables, which can provide safety against all dangers, mitigate the furies of nature and elements, and provide peace and happiness both in this world and hereafter? Sant Tulsidas says that the name of the divine is the potency, which in reality is the Parasjam, the Kalpa tree, and the storehouse of all happiness and destroyer of all miseries. The name of the divine, that is the panacea of all ills and evils. The principal teaching of the Upanishads is that one cannot achieve permanent happiness through physical or sensuous enjoyment, through wealth or the goods of the world, or even by elevation to happier realms above through the performance of sacrifices. Happiness can result only from spiritual enlightenment, which comes from recollection of the nature of the person devoted to remembering the name of the divine. Dr. Saras Radhakrishnan, the famous philosopher, repeatedly has said that improvement in the behavior of human beings is absolutely necessary for ending world conflicts. He says that this improvement can be brought about by spiritual knowledge, by Adhyatma Vidya. What is this spiritual knowledge? According to the Upanishads, the realization of God within ourselves is truly spiritual knowledge. All this world is a creation of the omnipresent, omniscient and omnipotent God. It is pervaded by Him in form and manifest. The Supreme Being is lodged within oneself, and realization of this Supreme Being is really Adhyatma Jnana, a way to liberation from miseries in this world and from the whirl of births and deaths hereafter. But this realization doesn't come by mere study or by learned discussions or by rituals. This realization comes by recollection of the name of that Supreme Being. The knowledge of the true name of that Supreme Being, therefore, is absolutely necessary for Adhyatma Jnana, or realization of the Supreme Being within oneself. The name of the Supreme Being is called Shabda Brahma. It is eternal and it is all pervading. It has neither beginning nor end. It transmits enormous energy. It is meditatable and recollectable at all times and in all circumstances. It is possessed of the potency of purification. Its constant recollection unfolds the Supreme Being within oneself. The name of the Supreme Being is bestower of happiness to all, irrespective of caste, color, religion or nationality. The recollection of the name of the Supreme Being dries the ocean of miseries from the world. The name of the Supreme Being is lustrous gem which enlightens the hearts of man within and without. The Shabda Brahma is recollectable in all circumstances and all times. Constant meditation and recollection of his name brings about purification of hearts and change of outlook instantaneously. The name of the Supreme Being is all pervading. Its knowledge is acquired from the Tattvadashi, Sadguru. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna that the knowledge of the Adhyatma Jnana can be acquired from the Tattvadashi. The constant recollection of his name is the japa in reality. By its recollection, the brutal nature of man is turned into divine. Apichetsu duracharo bhajate mamananyabhak sadhureva samantavya samyak vividato hi saha. So Lord Krishna says, even if a person has become duratma, evil, but if he takes to worship of God, if he tries to remember the divine, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma, he will soon be purified from all his impurities of the mind. And he becomes Mahatma. The only way to integral happiness is the constant recollection of all pervading name of the Supreme Being after acquiring its knowledge with the supreme grace of the living Tattvadashi Sadguru. His name alone is capable of saving the humanity from destruction. The disharmony between religion and science and politics is the real cause of all conflicts and miseries. To accept this disharmony is mere sham and hypocrisy. It is a fraud and deception which is being constantly played upon generation. It is a complete denial of Christ, Rama, Krishna or Buddha. The deliverance of human race lies in re-establishing complete harmony between science and politics, and religion is nothing but the realization of the Supreme Being within self by constant recollection of his name. So by just remembering him all the time, one gets purified in his heart and one will be able to see the divine love manifesting through all the beings of the creation. Such a person really loves the whole humanity, and there is no hatred, there is no trace of hatred in his mind. So how nice it is if we understand religion properly and practice it. To become divine means to be free from hatred, to love everyone to one's capacity. The prelude to the Bhagavad Puran, which describes the greatness of this scriptural work, notes in the words of sage Narad that in the three yugas, Satya, Treta and Dwapar, spiritual enlightenment and dispassion were the means to achieve redemption from bondage. In Kali Yuga, however, devotion alone brings about union with the Supreme Being. Among the different modes of devotion, chanting the divine name takes the pride of place for its efficacy and the ease with which anyone can adopt it. There is no rigorous discipline involved in trying to repeat God's name. What is most important requirement is willingness. Are you repeating God's name willingly? That's important. When there is willingness, there will be proper concentration. When there is proper concentration, there will be good meditation. When there is good meditation, one will have good joy, happiness. When he comes out of such meditation, he is full of serenity and happiness. Bhishma explained the glory of the divine name before reciting the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu to Yudhishthira when he asked 6 questions spanning the fundamental principles of spirituality. Yudhishthira asked, what is that one divinity spoken of in all the scriptures? What is the ultimate goal? Knowing and worshipping whom would human beings gain auspiciousness? According to you, which is the highest dharma among all the dharmas? Chanting which does a man get freed from the bondage of transmigration? All these questions were put to Bhishma by Yudhishthira. Bhishma, the great Acharya, a very great soul, he replied that the Supreme Being was He who was greater than the changing effects and the unchanging cause of the universe. He is the Lord of the universe, both moving and unmoving, and He is the God of all gods. He can't be measured in terms of space, time, and so on, as it transcends them all. And it is by praising this Purushottam with 1,000 names and by being always devoted to this goal that an individual can go beyond all miseries. Saints have often described the method of chanting God's names as a royal highway to realization of God. For the majority of people who are caught in the web of worldly miseries, the divine name is the panacea. Just like a spark of fire reduces a mountain of cotton to ashes in no time, the divine name is capable of counteracting all sins when chanted sincerely, devotedly, willingly. Once you have taken the spiritual path, most important is you must be sincere, not to commit the mistakes again and again, and to be aware of the unrighteousness. The spiritual practice of chanting God's name removes man's ignorance, which is the cause of bondage. This process can be likened to cleansing a mirror covered by dust. When the veil of ignorance is lifted, the devotee understands that God resides in him as the indwelling self which liberates him. So, an effective passport for attaining salvation is a constant recitation of the names of the Lord and chanting His glory. No restriction of any kind is imposed on this method of liberation. One should engage oneself in Nam Sankirtan. Sarveshu Kaleshu Ma Manusmara. Lord Krishna says, all the time remember me, then do your duties. So remembering God is most important, first priority. So then the duty becomes really wonderful. You will be performing duty also properly because it is followed by the repetition of God's name. It is said that even Brahma, Indra are not exempted from being bound by the shackles of Maya. There is an incident in life of Lord Krishna that Brahma was taught a lesson for hiding the cowherd boys and the cattle in a cave by the Lord himself taking as many forms as the missing lot and continuing to assume the same for 1 year. Indra went to the extent of showing his anger against Sri Krishna for not getting his due worship from the people, without knowing that it was also God's act. In spite of ample proof of his greatness, people still get shrouded in Maya. Sri Krishna took his friends to the banks of the Jamuna and enjoyed eating in their company. It is something astounding that when attempts are being made of offer him the havis by performing yajnas, the Lord takes the form of an ordinary human being and mixes freely with humble folk. In Krishna Avatar, there are many facets of the Lord's playful manifestations. So, people can easily approach God without any reservation. One who realizes that life is ephemeral will be able to achieve mental poise. For this, he should cultivate detachment towards transient objects and seek the holy company. Pleasures we presume to enjoy are but fleeting and mirage-like. To overcome Maya, delusion, we should understand the Atman and Brahman. It calls for a determined effort and the training of the mind to concentrate on God. The bonds of attachment can be broken by seeking the company of the holy, who can distinguish between real and unreal, who will show us the royal road to Godhead. They will help us to wipe out the ill effects of illusion and enable us to see the light continuously burning within us, but not visible because of ignorance. Once darkness is dispelled, we will be able to become introverts when good or bad, pleasure or pain, elation or depression will have no effect on us. The Bhagavad Gita emphasizes the need to discard desire, which breeds anger and ultimately leads us into conflicts and imbalance. We can attain a stage of mental equilibrium even while remaining amidst the worldly turmoil by developing the virtue of contentment by controlling the senses and by not giving room to desire, and by realizing that the so-called happiness is after all a myth. The two essential qualities required for this purpose are discrimination and detachment. An aging man loses capacity to enjoy pleasures. Men without wealth will not be cared for by their own kith and kin. When external influences cease to have any impact on us, we can break ourselves away from the shackles of samsara. Vacillation is repugnant to the concept of bhakti. The mind of a true devotee will not relent from its concentration on God's feet under pressure of adverse circumstance or extraneous influences, but to discipline the inherently fickle mind to 100% perfection is an arduous task. One of the saints compares the mind to a monkey which will not rest quiet even for a moment, pleading his inability to control and train the mind not to serve from the thoughts about God. He prays to the all-powerful Lord Nataraj, Shiva, to take the initiative himself and take his heart as his permanent abode. He is praying Lord Shiva to dwell in his heart. Shankaracharya, in his great composition Shivananda Lahari, has described the true nature of devotion by means of 5 examples which represented different stages of bhakti. One is the ankola tree and its seeds. It is said that the seeds that fall to the ground again stick to the tree. Second, magnet and iron. Third, husband and wife. Fourth, creeper and prop. 5, river and sea. The devotee's love for God would be above the limitation of space, his heart pining for union. He would not tolerate any obstruction to his service to the Lord. In the end, by his grace, God would take the devotee to his fold, and even as river water becomes inseparable from sea water, the two become one. The tongue that doesn't speak or sing the Lord's names and glory, the ears that do not listen to songs divine, the hands that do not make offerings or perform puja to him, the legs which do not tread the temple corridors, and the eyes that do not enjoy the beauty of his form to the heart's content, all forfeit the very purpose of their existence. To Adi Shankaracharya, the Supreme God is Lord Parameshwara, by worshipping whom a jiva could attain liberation from the vicious circle of birth and death. The chanting of mantras have got special significance. Mantras, special chants, in which are embedded the secrets of God's real form, are an effective medium of worship. Recited with sincerity and devotion, they help us to achieve perfect communion with the Creator. They are also potent antidotes to nullify the evil influences and deadly effects of black magic and other occult faculties. Mantras enable us to develop mystical powers, confer on us mental quietude, and give us the strength to withstand the impact of inimical forces. It is said, when the demons gained enormous might by learning special mantras through their religious teacher Shukracharya, Indra and the other devatas sought the assistance of his scholar Vishwarup and mastered equally forceful chants and got back the status which they had earlier lost. The Narayan Kavacham, which the Purohit taught them, contained 3 specific mantras in praise of God, also termed the Vaishnavi Vidya. It is armor providing eternal protection against attack from any quarter. Its repetition redeemed one from all ills and sins. The detailed account of the efficacy of the Narayan Kavacham also gave a description of the minimum rites one was expected to perform daily, as well as gist of the 10 incarnations of God. Recitation of the verses which contained the avatars would keep off all malefic forces. For instance, meditation on Sri Narasimha would help one to face any danger, and on Sri Ramchandra while on tour would enable one to get general protection. Even centuries ago, sages could foresee the trend of worldly events and could anticipate the attitude of people towards religion. Aware that they may not be inclined to go through these strict spiritual austerities, and yet in a bid to help them, they had prescribed a simple recipe to realize God, namely incessantly chanting God's names. This formula will cleanse the mind of impurities and enable God to reside within one's heart. The names bear significance. But even as a patient will not attempt to analyze the constituents of the medicine that is advised to swallow, there is no need to find out what they connote. Uttered with devotion, the very names of God will fetch bliss. The efficacy of this measure has been shown through Draupadi's appeal to Govinda. The Bhagavatam is specially intended to highlight the beneficial result of chanting God's name. Ajamil was saved from death's clutches, though he casually called his affectionate son named after God. Again, the child Dhruva could see God by virtue of his penance repeating God's name. It is learnt that Emperor Shivaji, in hiding, stealthily joined Tukaram's congregational prayers. Getting scent of this, his enemies lay in wait outside. But God, assuming the form of Shivaji, lured them away. Shivaji could escape thanks to his chanting the names of Panduranga and Vittal. Likewise, a sentry in an ammunition factory, unable to control his desire to join a bhajan by devotees, left his post late in the night. He later confessed about his dereliction of duty before his officer, who was surprised at his statement because he had made an inspection and found him alert. It is obvious that God has saved his devotee by taking his place. Like this, there are so many instances in the life stories of real devotees where God takes the responsibility of protecting the devotees. A common question asked by many is whether devotion and prayers, which are prescribed as a panacea for our evils, can remove hunger. Saints have replied in the affirmative that singing the praise of God will certainly fetch prosperity here, in this life itself, and in the life after liberation. And the life after liberation it gives. One of the saints' hymns brings out this point. Worldly requirements and spiritual needs will be met by invoking divine mercy. The law of righteousness is amended to suit the different eras, and for the present period, incessant chanting of God's name with deep conviction has been prescribed as the best and easiest method. Penance commended for the earlier Treta Yuga is hazardous, and one doing it should have Vedic knowledge and enormous wealth. Also, the mantras are to be uttered with clarity, and if there is a flaw in the procedure governing the conduct of the rites, it would recoil on the performers. After the Treta Yuga, emphasis was shifted to idol worship. The bhakti cult spread and temples were endowed with properly. The temples were endowed with property. There was a time when there used to be puja 6 times a day, and the offerings made to the deities were distributed to employees and the poor. Times have changed, and now most of the temples were bereft of the wherewithal even to arrange the minimal rites. It is in this context that devotees are being impressed with the efficacy of chanting and prayers. Even here, all will not be able to master works like the Divya Prabandham, but out of divine mercy, Andal has gifted to humanity a garland of verses called Tirupavai, which anyone can easily sing, they being simple. Moksha Parayanaha. Here is another glorious message for us. You have to be yearning for liberation. Your aspiration for moksha is a master stroke. It is a fort before you in yoga which dissolves the senses, the mind, and the intellect at one stroke. As mist dissolves before the sun, the senses, the mind, and the intellect dissolve, as it were, in a flow of moksha consciousness. In this state, your soul is surging forth into infinity. Your heart is yearning to attain union with the Absolute, like the calf running to the mother cow that it had lost, like a river rushing towards the ocean, not resting quiet until it reaches the ocean. As you grasp the breath, when you are being drowned in water, so is the soul to surge forth to that great destination called moksha, or liberation of the spirit, in the absolute Brahman. This longing, yearning, is a panacea for all ills of human life. This desire for liberation is the destruction of all desires. It is a self-consummation of oneself and the consuming of oneself in the fire of longing for that state where all longing ceases. To desire the Atman is to end all desires. It burns up every longing which is extraneous. Such a person is automatically freed from likes and dislikes. Vigatecha bhayakrodho sada mukta evasaha. He is freed from desire, fear, anger, and he is liberated. There is much suffering and misery in the world and in our own lives. Yet few inquire, as Lord Buddha did, as to why we suffer and how to alleviate human suffering. It takes a severe crisis or tragedy for us to turn to God for answers. The goal of the Gita is to find a permanent solution to human misery. It proposes that a human being should not be content with ephemeral pleasures in the material world, and he should instead seek and attain eternal happiness in the spiritual realm. Bhagavad Gita speaks of 5 principal truths. The Ishvara or God is the Supreme Being, the Supreme Controller, the Creator, Maintainer and Destroyer of all cosmic manifestation, the cause of all causes. Shri Krishna declares in the Gita, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. Jiva, the living entity or soul or Atma, is a part and parcel of God. The soul is within the body, yet is separate from it. The soul never perishes or dies. Upon death, the soul merely enters into another body. Prakriti or the material nature comprises earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Prakriti is constituted of three gunas or modes of material nature: sattva, rajas, and tamas, which permeate and affect all aspects and facets of creation. Kala or time is eternal. It is death and it consumes each and everything. Karma means activity. Karma leads to the jiva enjoying or suffering in this life or future lives, the consequences of his or her past actions. The jiva creates his or her own destiny. All karma, good or bad, binds the jiva to samsara, or never-ending cycle of birth and death, which is the cause of all suffering. On understanding these truths and realizing the transient nature of human existence, one starts to view life in the correct perspective and is better able to cope with one's anxieties and dilemmas. Mahatma Gandhi used to say, "When doubts haunt me, when disappointment stares me in the face, and I see not one ray of hope on the horizon, I turn to the Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me, and I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow." Those who meditate on the Gita will derive fresh joy and new meanings from it every day. The Gita describes in detail the four main yogic processes: karma, meditation, dhyana, knowledge, and bhakti or loving devotion, through which one can attain peace, happiness, and liberation. The Bhagavad Gita is a true treat to the troubled people of the world. In the Gita, Lord Krishna boldly proclaims himself the Almighty God. He says, "There is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me, as pearls are strung on a thread. Sutre manigana iva." He repeatedly beckons us to him in his abode. All Krishna wants is our love. If one suffers from miseries of the world, one should cultivate the love of God. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, all varieties of religion, and just surrender to me, I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. The name of the Almighty is the storehouse of all happiness and destroyer of all miseries. I bow down to the name of the Almighty, who is all-pervading. It is the cause of the creation of the sun, the moon, and the fire. It is the bestower of salvation. Lord Shiva disseminated its knowledge to aspirants in Kashi. It gives happiness both in this world and hereafter. The glory of the name of God is well known in all the four yugas and in all the four Vedas, especially in the Kali Yuga. God's name is the only shelter against all miseries and bestower of all happiness. The ocean of miseries of the world is dried up the moment the name of God is recollected. Wise men should think the glory and potency of this nature and the divine name in their mind. In Kali Yuga, the name of God is Kalpa tree. Its recollection burns all the miseries of the world and provides liberation from its bondage. When the most afflicted recollects the name of God, all his miseries are destroyed and he attains happiness. The name of the Almighty is a lustrous gem. If you aspire enlightenment both within you and outside you, recollect it in your own heart. So what is very important is we must take steps to control the senses. We have to make little effort. Simply uttering all miseries should go away. They simply won't go that way. You have to make effort. A bullock or a horse which cannot be controlled, a car without brakes, or a life which is not based on control of the senses are all dangerous. So control of the senses is very important. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali Maharshi emphasized the need to tightly control the tendencies of the mind to go off in all directions, running after various desires. Mind and senses must be kept in check within limited bounds. Even happiness which exceeds certain limits can be harmful. For everything there is a limit. There is a range of healthy functioning. For example, the normal body temperature is 98.6 degrees. If it goes up even 1 degree, there will be a disease in progress. Only when it is within the appropriate level does it indicate a healthy body. In the same way, your blood pressure is normal when it is 120/80. If the blood pressure goes up to 150 or over 90, 150/90, it indicates an abnormal condition in the body, which may be indicative of a disease. Similarly, the heartbeat should be around 75. If it increases, a disease will be in progress. The same is also true for your eyes. There is a range of light that is appropriate to healthy functioning. If the light is too bright, the eyes cannot see and will be harmed. That is true as well in the case of ears. There is a proper range of sound. If the level of sound exceeds that range, such as may happen close to an airplane or train or loudspeaker, the hearing will become impaired. We see that life is something like a limited company. If you want to carry on unlimited business with this limited company, then you will be subject to a great deal of distress. Therefore, you have to impose restrictions on your behavior and spend your life acting always within certain prescribed limits. This can also be called discipline. Discipline is particularly necessary for the spiritual progress of an individual. Without discipline, a person is likely to become nothing but an animal. But discipline too has to be exercised within limits. There is even a need to regulate your discipline if you have to enjoy life. You see that for everything there is a limit and a bound. If you stay within these limits, you will not be troubled by life. You need to take proper notice of these two dreadful enemies of a person. That is kama and krodha, desire and anger, and develop complete control over them. These enemies are not external to you, they are your own inner enemies. If you are defeated by your inner enemies, how can you ever hope to conquer your external ones? But once you keep these inner enemies under firm check, your other enemies can be defeated quite easily. Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that desire and anger are the primary obstacles to liberation. So it's absolutely important that they should be curbed. He who recognizes that the Atman in him and in all beings is one and the same dwells in the constant presence of God. Whether he is a householder or a renunciant, whether he is alone or in a crowd, everyone has to recognize the divinity that is inherent in all human beings. Sage Narad declared, Prema Amritasya Swarupaha. Prema Amritasya Swarupaha. Love is the embodiment of ambrosia. In the mundane world, man considers the four purusharthas, the four goals of life, as a means to liberation. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Righteousness, material wealth, satisfaction of desires, and liberation, which are considered the four aims of human existence. But they are not all. There is a fifth aim for mankind which transcends even liberation. This is Parama Prema Bhakti. Parama Prema, supreme love. This love principle is divine. Love and God are not distinct from each other. God is love and love is God. It is only when the truth of this love principle is understood that the meaning of human existence can be realized. In a home where three persons live, if they have harmony amongst them and cooperate with each other, verily that home is heaven itself, where divine bliss reigns. If on the contrary, the three persons lack harmony and adjustment, dislike each other and behave as enemies, there can be no hell worse than that. Heaven and hell are dependent on the conduct of people. The body is a home wherein reside three entities called mind, speech, and limbs. True humanness consists in a unity of thought, word, and deed. In Vedantic parlance, this unity is described as Trikarana Shuddhi, triple purity. True liberation consists in giving expression in words to the thoughts which arise in mind and to practice what one says. The ancients considered this triple unity as a form of yoga. Manasyekam, Vachasyekam, Karmanyekam, Mahatmanam. Those whose mind, words and deeds are in complete accord are great beings. Manas anyatha, Vachas anyatha, Karmanyanatha, Duratmanam. The wicked are those whose thoughts differ from their words and actions. Hence, every person should strive to achieve unity in thought, word and deed. That is the hallmark of humanness. This profound truth is proclaimed by Vedantic pronouncement that the body is a temple in which the eternal Atman is the indweller. The essence of Vedanta is the triune unity of thought, word and deed. In this unity, true bliss can be experienced. It will also demonstrate the spiritual basis of divinity. So, we have to understand the significance of life properly, and we should definitely read and understand and practice the spiritual values contained in our scriptures by constantly in touch with holy company. So these are the ways to discipline the mind and to correct our behavior. We should not unnecessarily keep on justifying our actions. We should always be open-minded to correct ourselves. So in this way, we will be able to overcome all the difficulties and problems and sufferings in life. That means have tremendous faith in the name of God, Surrender totally to Him. Have complete faith that the Divine takes care of you in every respect. Shri Rama Bhajo Sukame Dukame. Sant Tulsidas has said in a song, Ram Bhajo. Remember God at all times. Then you will see how you get into that tranquil state of peace and joy. So remembering God all the time, dwelling upon spiritual values, practicing the principles of life are the ways and means which are the panacea for all ills. Thank you very much. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavagai Tejasvi Navadidamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. May the Lord protect us, may He nourish us, may our knowledge be fruitful and enlightened, may we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.